Title. Ashes and Embers. I always believed love was a fortress. The strongest shield against life's storms, but love, I discovered, can also be a weapon. A blade, sharp and cruel, designed to cut you to your marrow. That realization came to me on a late September evening. The kind where the amber sky blurs into a deep navy, and the air smells faintly of change. I was sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, staring at the text message that would change my life. Hey babe, miss you already. Last night was amazing. The message wasn't for me. No, it was for my boyfriend, Ethan. And the sender? A number I didn't recognize. But the implications were clear. Everything about it, the playful tone, the affection, was something Ethan would never get from me again. You know, they say your heart breaks in an instant. That's not true. It cracks slowly. Each one of Ethan's lies. Each moment I ignored the red flags. Each time I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Those had been the tiny fissures. This message was the final blow. The one that splintered my heart into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The beginning of the end. I met Ethan 3 years ago when I was 25. He was charming in a way that seemed effortless. His laughter a melody that made me forget how hard life could be. I was struggling at the time, working long hours as a graphic designer for a marketing firm that barely paid me enough to cover rent. My days were long, my nights sleepless. But Ethan? He was my escape. He'd show up with takeout and cheap wine, flick on some Netflix comedy special, and suddenly the weight of my existence didn't feel so crushing. But looking back, I realized that the signs were always there. The late nights he couldn't explain. The phone calls he'd take in another room. The way he always seemed to have just enough charm to smooth over my suspicions. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself it was my insecurities talking. But deep down, I knew better. This text message? It wasn't just confirmation of what I'd feared. It was an indictment of every time I had chosen to ignore my gut. And the worst part? When I confronted him later that evening, he didn't even try to deny it. All right, yeah, I've been seeing someone else, he admitted, leaning against the kitchen counter as though he were telling me he'd forgotten to take the trash out. Not that he'd ripped our relationship to shreds. Things haven't been great between us. Emma, I didn't think you'd. I stood frozen in our tiny kitchen, staring at Ethan as though he were a stranger. A cruel apparition in the body of the man I had spent 3 years loving. His words, the casual, dismissive way he said them, reverberated in my head like a cruel echo I couldn't silence. Things haven't been great between us? That's your excuse? My voice trembled as I spoke, but my anger poured out like lava, threatening to scorch everything in its path. You didn't even talk to me about it, Ethan. You just went behind my back. Look, I didn't want to hurt you, he muttered, running a hand through his dark hair. The way he said it, almost exasperated, made me want to scream. His sharp jawline, usually so attractive, now seemed to clench with irritation as though my heartbreak was an inconvenience. I didn't think you'd, didn't think I'd what? I interrupted, stepping toward him. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. Find out? Catch you? What did you think, Ethan? That I'd just keep playing happy girlfriend while you screwed around? His silence was deafening. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. That maybe somewhere beneath the smooth, deceitful exterior, there was a flicker of remorse. But instead, he sighed, a deep, tired sound, like I was the one who had done something wrong. It's complicated, he finally said, looking at me with those piercing blue eyes that I had once loved, now filled with nothing but detachment. I didn't plan for this to happen, Emma. I didn't plan to foul. I stood there, staring at him as though I could somehow force him to take back every word, every betrayal, My mind felt like it was unraveling, caught halfway between disbelief and rage. How could he stand there, so calm, so indifferent, as though the last 3 years of my life, of our life, meant so little? Complicated? My voice wavered, low and sharp. You think screwing someone else behind my back and lying to my face is complicated? Do you have any idea what you've done, Ethan? What you've destroyed? My breath hitched, tears threatening to spill, but I forced them back. Not here, not in front of him. He didn't deserve my tears. Emma, I don't expect you to understand, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose, like he was the one being burdened. I didn't want it to happen this way. It just, just what? I cut in, my voice rising. Just happened? You fell into someone else's bed while I was what? Making dinner? Helping you with your resume? Believing every word out of your lying mouth? I wanted him to flinch, to wince, to show some crack in his infuriating composure. But Ethan just shook his head and sighed again. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The raw hurt I had felt only moments earlier began to calcify into something harder, sharper, something that couldn't be swept aside by his dismissive attitude. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. Not after everything he'd done to me. Who is she? I asked, my voice quieter now but no less icy. Ethan's eyes flicked away, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough to confirm what I already suspected. He wasn't just cheating. He was hiding her, protecting her. Does it matter? He asked finally, his tone almost bored. It matters to me, I snapped. What's her name? How long has this been going on? Emma. Stop, he said, his voice firm now, like he thought he could simply end the conversation by sheer will. I don't want to drag her into this. Oh, but it's fine to drag me through the mud, right? I laughed bitterly, the sound escaping me like a bark. You don't care about protecting me, do you? Just her. God. Ethan, you're even more pathetic than I thought. His face turned cold at that. For the first time, he seemed to drop the mask of indifference. And I could see the flicker of anger behind his eyes. But I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. It's none of your business, he said tightly. We're done. Emma, you need to accept that. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. But maybe it's for the best you and I. We weren't working anyway. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something at him. To take the stupid kettle off the stove and hurl it at his smug, unbothered face. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, my chest heaving, my nails digging into my palms hard enough to leave crescents in my skin. And then I took a deep, trembling breath. You're right, I said finally, my voice eerily calm. We're done. For a moment, he looked startled by my sudden shift in tone. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of explaining myself. I turned on my heel and walked out of the kitchen, out of the apartment entirely, slamming the door behind me so hard the walls shook. The plan. I spent the next 2 days in a haze of anger and humiliation, replaying our conversation in my mind like a looped recording I couldn't turn off. His words, his arrogance, fueled the fire inside me until it burned hot enough to eclipse the pain. And that's when I decided. I wasn't just going to walk away while Ethan and his little secret lover skipped off into the sunset. No, Ethan had taken 3 years of my life, my trust, my dignity, and I was going to take something from him in return. That night, I sat at my tiny desk in the corner of my room, the glow of my laptop illuminating my tear-streaked face. Ethan had always been meticulous about his secrets. But he made one crucial mistake. He underestimated how much I paid attention. I remembered every detail he let slip over the years. Every contact name in his phone that seemed suspicious. Every business trip that didn't quite add up. And then there was his laptop. Our laptop. Really. Since I was the one who had bought it for his birthday last year. He rarely logged out of his accounts because, as he'd once said with a laugh, "What's the point? It's not like I have anything to hide." How ironic. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Emails, message threads, photo attachments. Evidence of his affair piled up before me like a sordid trail of breadcrumbs. Her name was Melissa, and judging by the messages, their relationship had started nearly 6 months ago. 6 months of deceit, and it wasn't just personal. Oh no, this went much deeper. Melissa wasn't just some random woman he'd met online or at a bar. She was his boss. I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair as the pieces fell into place. Ethan had complained about Melissa often in the beginning, calling her demanding and unreasonable. But then, sometime last spring, his tone had changed. He stopped talking about her altogether, except to occasionally praise her genius ideas or mention how much she valued his input. It made sense now. He wasn't just sleeping with her. He was using her to climb the corporate ladder. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest if the messages I found were real. And they certainly appeared to be. Then Melissa had been pulling strings for Ethan, helping him land projects that weren't his to claim. One email even hinted at a sizable bonus he'd received for a project he had nothing to do with. It reeked of corruption, and I had the proof sitting right in front of me. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But instead, I just felt hollow. This wasn't justice. It was vengeance. Pure and simple, born from my pain and betrayal. Still, I couldn't stop myself. Ethan and Melissa had dug themselves into this hole. Not me. If anyone deserved the consequences, it was them. The fallout. The next morning, armed with a steaming cup of overpriced coffee and a fire in my chest that refused to die, I walked into work with a plan. I wasn't sure if it was the caffeine or the adrenaline, but for the first time in days, I felt alive, focused. My office was a gray, windowless cube of misery, but today, it felt like a war room, filled with possibility. I spent my lunch hour composing a detailed, anonymous email. In it, I outlined Ethan and Melissa's affair and attached screenshots of their personal exchanges and incriminating emails about the projects that had been misappropriated. It was all going directly to Melissa's superior, the executive vice president of their company. My finger hovered over the send button for only a moment before I pressed it. There was no going back now. The impact was quick, like throwing a match into a pool of gasoline. By the end of that week, rumors had already begun to swirl through Ethan's office. He was quieter than you